discuss this now with our guest, Andrei Vulchek, a political analyst and journalist and filmmaker. Welcome to the programme, sir. Now, the Venezuelan government had ordered Guaido not to leave the country. He's obviously disregarded that travel ban, but now he's back. Do you expect him to be arrested?
I think he should be arrested, but as we see, he's not yet. Look, this is basically a very typical situation, how the Western mass media is reacting to these situations. If Venezuela would do what it promised to do, is to arrest Guaido, it would be immediately depicted and described as a country which is violating human rights. When it's not doing this, several media outlets are describing Venezuela as a weak President Maduro is a weak president who is afraid to actually arrest Guaido. Look, all this situation is, to put it to perspective, imagine a Western country like France, for example, that some countries may not like. And the opposition, so-called opposition leader who wants to overthrow French constitution and French government would be supported by 6 or 7 or 10 or 20 countries all over the world. And he would declare himself the president of France and begin flying around the world, getting funding from China, from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea, from Venezuela itself. And then he would define the decision of the French court not to leave the country. He would go around the world again, basically saying that he is ready to overthrow the French government, and land at Charles de Gaulle airport and mobilize the supporters. Again, the only goal is to overthrow the constitution of France and the government. Unfortunately, we don't look at the situation like this anymore, because this exclusivity or the feel in the West that it's exceptionalist society doesn't allow us to think like that. But it is exactly the same scenario. And you know what would happen to that person? He would be arrested at Charles de Gaulle immediately. So this person, Guaido, who was, handpicked by the West, by the United States, basically goes around Latin America. He goes to Paraguay, he goes to Brazil, to Argentina, and to Colombia, 4 countries which are ready to assist United States in overthrowing Venezuelan government. He lands at Simón Bolívar International Airport outside Caracas. Nothing happens to him. He goes to the city. He drags thousands of supporters behind him. And again, the West doesn't really think that this is a proof of democracy. This is a proof of democracy.
He's certainly acting like a man who has some level of immunity. US officials have, though, repeatedly said that if anything does happen to Guaido, that there will be severe consequences for the Maduro government. So do you think any action against Guaido now would justify a US intervention, perhaps?
No, of course not. I mean, Guaido is basically disobeying the Supreme Court of his own country. He's still citizen of Venezuela. I don't know, maybe he has by now 2 or 3 other passports. But as far as I'm concerned, he's a Venezuelan citizen. He's in absolute defiance when it comes to Venezuelan law, and he should be arrested. Now, of course, the United States or the West have absolutely no right to intervene in such a process. I mean, their interest is basically to get rid of Maduro's government because it's a socialist country with enormous influence, at least historically, on the rest of Latin America, and because it is so rich when it comes to natural resources that it can supply the oil for 30 years to the entire world if they really figure out how to really tap into the Orinoco Basin reserves.
The Spanish foreign minister gave us his views on the situation in Venezuela. We can just take a listen to what he had to say.
Perhaps when this process began, someone behind it did not think that Maduro would be able to show resistance. Military operations to impose democracy have never worked.
So as we just heard, he said military interventions can never bring democracy. Do you think Spain and the rest of the EU are concerned by the prospect of US military action in Venezuela?
Well, they are concerned to some extent because they know very well, they are closer to Venezuela. They at least try to understand Venezuela. They know there would be a civil war. It's going to be Syria. Look, I mean, I just came from Syria. I was at Idlib area at the border, and I've talked to Syrian military, and they said what is happening in Venezuela is exactly how all this began in Syria. So I think at least in Spain they may understand this, and they understand it in a few other countries, like my buddies at Cinque Stelle, 5-star movement in Italy. They understand perfectly well that there is a great danger. Venezuela is a determined country. It's people are very strong and they're very determined. And Maduro has a majority. It's not a big majority, but it is a solid majority. So if there is military intervention, the military is going to fight. These people will fight, and the people will rise, and they know it. And it's going to be a bloodshed. It's going to be a massacre. And even if they take Caracas, it's a very complex country with very high mountains and enormous jungle in Orinoco Basin. People will go to the jungle. People will go to the mountains. There will be resistance. It's not easy terrain to fight.
Andrei Vulchek, political analyst, journalist and filmmaker, thank you for your time, sir. Well, plenty more still to come this hour, including how the Syrian military has been hit by a surge of terrorist activity. We have the details on that and plenty more after the break.